Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Political Talks JB. I am your host, Julian Boykin, and tonight I am joined by Congressman Barry Moore, who is running for U.S. Senate representing the great state of Alabama. Congressman Moore, how's it going tonight?
It's going good, Julian. Thank you for having me on with you.
Thank you for taking time out of your campaign and out of your busy schedule in D.C. to talk with me tonight. Real quick, let the people know what you've done with your track record as being in the state house as our current congressman and with your aspirations to be our next U.S. senator.
Well, I started actually a small business. I tell everybody I was in the garbage business. The transition from garbage to politics is pretty easy to make. But if I'm elected to the Senate, I'll probably be the only guy in the U.S. Senate with CDLs. But I actually built a business from the ground up. And through that process of building the business over the years, I served 6 years in the military. And, they asked me to run for office a couple times, and I told them no. And eventually, in 2010, we decided to engage and won 2 terms in the state legislature. And I thought 2 was enough. That was 8 years of my life that I thought I'd given to the great state of Alabama. And then on August 21st, 2015, when I was the first elected official in the nation to endorse Trump, his team then asked us to run for Congress. And so each time we've been asked to make that next step, Julian, continue to service to the country. And having been with the president as long as I have, 10 years now, and been in the trenches with him and seeing what he's endured, we want to make sure we keep solid allies with some experience in the fight with the president to get this America First agenda accomplished. And so when people started calling me, when Coach announced that he was going to run for governor, he and I went to D.C. at the same time. We both got elected in 2020. And when he decided to run for governor, we have very similar voting records. We serve on very similar committees. And so a lot of people started calling saying, you need to step up and you need to be willing to serve in the U.S. Senate. And so it was a calling for us. We had to put a lot of prayer behind it because it wasn't something we wanted to do, but the call was there. We felt prompted to do it. And so we stepped into the race, and so far, so good.
Thank you. When it comes to small business, Alabama relies heavily on our small businesses. What is your plan as the next U.S. Senator as far as maintaining the current small business that we have and creating programs to increase more small business owners?
Well, I think you got to look at what Reagan said about the government. The government's idea on the economy is when it's moving, you tax it. If it keeps moving, you regulate it. When it fails, you subsidize it. I've always been a proponent, and Reagan was right about this. If you'll lower taxes and you'll lower regulations, you'll grow industry, you'll grow the economy, you'll create jobs. And what happens is that gets the government, instead of regulating and slowing business growth and taxing you, it allows you to keep the money in your economy, in your business, to reinvest in local jobs. And as a small business guy, I get that. I dealt with agencies all the time. The regulatory environment was stifling sometimes, just trying to run your business day to day. And so I think for us, when we went to the state legislature, we removed Alabama to one of the top 5 states in the nation for open for business. And we brought Kimber, we brought Austal, we brought Airbus, we brought Polaris, we brought Remington Firearms. All those companies came to Alabama on our watch in 10 years. And as Vice Chair of Small Business and Commerce, I was part of that process of bringing Airbus to Alabama. We had to decrease some regulatory environment, limit some of the lawsuits that they were going to be liable for parts that were put in their planes that they didn't even manufacture. And so those sort of things that you do to allow business to open in the state and to give them incentives to be here and to protect them so they can build an industry, in which we see that now with Airbus. They've got a backlog. They're hiring people. Same with Austal. They're building ships. We just helped them secure new Navy contracts. And so we're in the process, and we'll continue that process we started in the state at the federal level to make sure that Alabama is very competitive. And so, we talk about, and Trump talks a lot about the golden age of America, but Alabama is well positioned to be the golden age of Alabama. And I think you'll see that. We just saw Lilly announced a few weeks ago, $6 billion investment into the state of Alabama. Novelis just made, up until that point, Novelis $4 billion investment in Alabama was the biggest we'd ever seen. And then Lilly did $6 billion. And then we just got Spacecom to Alabama. It was Jim Jordan that called me 2-3 years ago. I was landing in D.C. and he said, Barry, we need to see about bringing the FBI to Huntsville, Alabama. And so I voted against funding expansion in D.C. of the FBI to help move it out of that swamp up there and out of that spear of just it's almost bureaucratic. It's not really the American people, to get those agencies back out across rural America and then hire the people that think like we think to run the agencies that we're paying them to run. And so there's a lot of opportunities. Of course, workforce development is going to be part of that. And so even at the state legislature and out at the federal level, I understand the importance of allowing schools to have an opportunity. Not everybody's going to go to a four-year college. Not everybody needs a $70,000 student loan and no job. A lot of kids, Charlie Kirk talked a lot about this. A lot of people are more skilled at certain level of whether it's welding or mechanicking or HVAC or whatever, 3D computers, aircraft manufacturing, all kind of skills that we can fund in local education, that those kids come out and go to work at 80, 100 grand a year, and they stay in Alabama and they have no student debt. So there's a great opportunity there if we make that investment in workforce development as well.
When we talk about agriculture, we have farmers now getting out of the business and selling to commercial developers, subdivisions and things of that nature. How do we create programs to entice more people, especially our young people, to go into agriculture?
What you got to do, and I'm an ag science guy from Auburn, and so I grew up on a farm until 1980. We were farmers, row croppers. As a matter of fact, I still live on the family farm, and my cousins are farming that land. But what we've got is the entry level right now to get in farming is so staggering. So we need some young farmer programs so they can get the loans to get the equipment. And then we've worked on, and I'm on ag committee, but reference prices, that safety net program and crop insurance programs, those things have to be solid. And then you have to work with lenders to make sure that those farmers can get the loans they need. And so that's a challenge we face. In the big, beautiful bill, we just raised reference prices on a lot of those products to allow those farmers to compete. But there's a lot of things we can do. But I think more than anything is the money that we printed during COVID and during the Biden administration, that inflation at 20%, input costs for farmers went through the roof. And so their crops, what they had in an acre of cotton was far more than it would sell for. So the reference price wasn't even enough to make them whole. So we raised the reference prices, but stop spending like drunk sailors in Washington, D.C. Stop printing money and slow inflation, which we just saw Trump, 2.7% is what he, that's a remarkably low number. But as we put downward pressure on fuel costs and as we put downward pressure on equipment costs, things that we'll do to allow the startup for a young farmer, and then get some bridge loans to get those guys in business, and then make sure on the back end that the reference prices and the commodities are well negotiated with other countries so that those product prices come up. Then there's room in there for margin. Right now, there's very little room, and they're betting on the weather, and they're really at the end of their rope. And so we've got to do some things for farmers. I serve on ag committee. I've been on this. We're working on a farm bill, and we had a pretty good bipartisan bill, I think, last Congress, but the Democrats wouldn't move it out of the Senate. So now that we have the Republican-controlled Senate, the Republican-controlled House, I think with the big, beautiful bill, the tax cuts we've got in place, it's time for us to go ahead and get a farm bill done this coming year, get it passed through the Senate so that the lenders going into the next production year will say, hey, these guys, this is the number. We can loan on that, and it allows them to stay in business and keep moving. Because you're right, we're seeing tremendous consolidation within the ag communities because small farmers just can't make it anymore. And so that's why you're just seeing this consolidation. And now they're 2% of the American population producing 100% of the food. And so we've got to make sure that small family farms have a chance to survive. And part of the onus is on us to lower inflation, but make sure reference prices are raised. And then there's programs that allow these farmers to borrow the money, especially young farmers who don't have a lot of land. They don't have a lot of assets, but they want to go into farming, to give them an opportunity to do that. Because when I came out of college, I wanted to go back on the farm, but the numbers didn't make sense. And so I went in the animal health industry and worked on that side of it until I started my own company. But reality is that it's tough right now. If you're a young guy and you don't have a daddy or granddaddy who owns a bunch of land, you just can't hardly go out and start. And even the ones that do don't always want to borrow against daddy's land or granddaddy's land because the numbers are so tight, the margins are so tight, they may not survive.
Correct. When we talk about young people getting into agriculture, small business, and things of that nature, how do we create programs for more young people that, like you said, they may not want to go to college? They want to get into tech. They want to get into cyber, welding, construction, auto mechanics. How do we create more programs for our young people that are in high school, not coming out of high school, that are in high school, to where before they graduate, they can hit the ground running in a career field that doesn't bog them down in student loans?
Well, I think it's important that there's an ability for us, and especially in education, to encourage kids to go in that area. Not to, like we used to back in the day, if you didn't get a college degree, well, you weren't going to make it in life. But I think in many ways, that was kind of pushed on us by the four-year system. I think we need to let kids know that there's no shame in that game. If you go out and get a certification and as a diesel mechanic, an HVAC guy, a welder certified, whatever that looks like, and also being able to run the computers and the systems in these manufacturing plants. I think we need to take that I think Charlie Kirk talked a little bit about it, and certainly there's a lot of people out there that talk about there is a certain amount of opportunity in the blue collar world and in the entrepreneur world that you don't have to go get that 4-year college degree. And I think in many ways we got to do a better job of making sure our educators understand that, hey, not all kids want to go to college, and all kids need to go to college. It's not that they're not smart enough, but they're skilled in another area and they're geniuses in certain areas. We need to plug them into those areas where they can be successful. And so I think there's programs, obviously, but I think it starts with us educating kids, saying, hey, look at this opportunity at this plant, or this opportunity here in the A&P industry, where you can go out and build, you can be a certified mechanic on an airplane or turbines or whatever that is. And so for us, I think it's important that we just don't push the 4-year degree. I think you have to push some tech stuff. You have to push some, some education stuff, like you said, at the high school level, the continuing education programs that helps develop skill sets. Nursing, I mean, there's dual enrollment programs now that allows opportunities for young people to come out in a couple of years. They can be practicing a trade of some kind. And so I think it's on us to make sure we educate our kids and say, hey, there's other avenues that you can go in. You don't have to go to some 4-year school. You can go to a trade school, or you got a great skill set, man. You got a great mind for computers. You can do this, this, and this. And so, I think it's on us. I think there's programs available. I think educating, informing kids about those programs, but also letting them know there's great careers out there that you may have not have ever heard of that are going to be growing in this state, and you can stay here and make a great living.
When we talk about crime, we have a lot of areas across the state of Alabama where they're struggling trying to just sustain officers. You had some are well below a sustainment level, and some are having to partner with the sheriff department that's like in another county just to help out due to the low numbers that they have as it relates to retaining police officers and things of that nature. How do we create more police officers in the state, and how do we create transparency with the public and the police department?
Well, I think for us, it's important. The morale within our law enforcement agencies is at times it's gotten really low over the last few years. And, I don't understand. It's difficult to find people who want to go into law enforcement, because you see it all the time. If he pulls his weapon, if somebody pulls a weapon on him and the law enforcement guy pulls a weapon, he's going, if the officer discharges that weapon, he's probably going to prison. He's going to be sued. He's going to be protested. Everything's going to happen. But if you don't pull that weapon, he winds up in a box. And so the problem is, we've got to make sure that the law enforcement knows we've got their back. I'm not saying all law enforcement officers are bad. Are good, but I'm saying it's such a small percentage. But when they react the way they're trained and then they get demonized for that, it's tough to find people who will sign up for that, where you'll go out every night and you'll walk up to that car in the dark, not knowing if it's going to be your last stop. And so there needs to be a certain amount of support between local leaders and certainly the federal level to say, hey, we've got your back and we're going to be with you, and we back the blue. And I think many times we fail to do that in this community, that we always villainize the law enforcement officers. It's just tough to find guys that want to do that. And so I think certainly boosting morale, letting them know we've got their back, proper funding, and then no soft on crime AGs and DAs. I mean, if that lawman risks his life to arrest somebody, and whatever that looks like, whether he has to go into a property, into a home, side of road arrest, put them in a car, take them downtown, book them, and then 3 days later they're out with no cash bail, or they're back out on the street. Why did he risk his life to start with? And so we need to make sure that the work they're doing is rewarded by a justice system that actually imparts a penalty for the crime that is committed, rather than putting those guys right back out on the streets.
2 more questions. First question, if people want to get in contact with you, ask additional questions, or make a donation to your campaign, how can they do that?
So BarryMooreForAlabama.com is our webpage. People can go on there. We've got links to donate. You can watch our videos, a little bit about our voting record on there, a little bit about what we've done, the 6 years or 5 years in DC and the 8 years in the state legislature. And so that's a great spot, great website, and it's very informative, even if I must say so myself.
Last question. Why should the people of Alabama vote for you as the next U.S. Senator?
Well, I think I've got a track record, and no other individual in the race has any legislative experience in this Senate race. I have passed bills into law at the state level. I have passed bills into law at the federal level for our veterans. Joe Biden even signed one of my bills into law as a Republican under a majority Democrat House, Senate, and the White House was Democrat, and I got a bill signed into law for our veterans. So I've proven I can get the job done and work across the aisle when the time calls for that. but I have a record that I'm very proud of. And I can go to work day one. I can literally move my staff across the way to the Capitol on the Senate side, and we will be able to start to work immediately. When 26, when this election happens in November 26, we only got 24 months of Donald Trump's term left. We need somebody that can go to work day one, get the job done, and we also need somebody with relationships in the House and Senate. And I've got friends in committee staff on the House and Senate, and when I call the president, he takes my call. So if there's something that Alabama needs, I can call POTUS and say, hey, sir, here's where we're at, or if we're working on something. It helps to build those relationships, and we don't have time to do that with 24 months left after the November 26th election. So I would tell people, look at my record, look at what I've done, know that I'm a true conservative, I'm an effective member with relationships on the Hill, and I can go to work day one.
Ladies and gentlemen, Congressman Barry Moore, candidate for U.S. Senator, representing the great state of Alabama. Congressman Moore, thank you for your time, and best of luck to you in your campaign.
Thank you, Julie.